Leading on from that, it's been 1 year since Donald Trump returned to the White House, where he has reshaped U.S. trade, security, and diplomatic priorities. To assess what that first year has meant for South Korea, we're joined by Matthew David Jenkins, Associate Professor from the Department of Political Science at Gyeongsang National University. Professor Jenkins, thank you for joining us this morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
So Trump's tariff policies have been at the forefront in terms of key issues for South Korea, and there are still some uncertainties surrounding key export sectors such as memory chips. So what do you make of the trade deal between Washington and Seoul thus far, and how do you see it progressing?
Yeah, so I think first of all, it's a pretty good, significant achievement in terms of the initial reduction in tariffs, right? Going from 25 to 15. So I think that's a remarkable achievement. However, a major sticking point remains the memory chips and whether that tariff rate will continue to apply to those as well. So that's obviously very important for South Korea to have, to be able to export memory chips. It's a major part of its economy, and it's also a major part of the U.S.'s economy as well, because the chips go into the U.S. consumer products, right? AI and things like this. And so the issue now is the Trump administration is threatening a 100% tariff on those chips, which is very high and would be damaging both to the U.S. and to South Korea. Why would it be doing that? Well, Trump's tariffs are designed to be used as leverage to get something else. So what does the U.S. want? Probably they want more investment in manufacturing, chip manufacturing in the United States. Could be that, or it could be that they want South Korea to further, decouple from China, to further limit chip exports to China, or chip manufacturing in China. I think both of those things are pretty unrealistic, right? South Korean companies are already very committed. They've already committed to companies like Samsung and SK Hynix have committed, billions of dollars of investment in the United States. It would be very problematic to try to reduce production in China. And so I imagine that, maybe there'll be some minor concessions, but I imagine that this deal will move through without any major changes.
And building on the discussion around trade, so Seoul continues to navigate the intensifying rivalry between the U.S. and China. And how do you think South Korea has been effectively managing to balance the tensions between them? And how do you see this dynamic unfolding going forward?
I think Korea's doing a great job. It's in a very tricky situation, between a rock and a hard place, right? On the one hand, it has to keep the U.S. happy in terms of its military alliance, right, and strategic positions around the peninsula, and at the same time, it has to signal to China that, hey, we're not trying to contain you. We're here for business, right? And the thing with the U.S. is mostly because of North Korea. Like, that's the reason why we have this major alliance. And so it's been doing a really good job. I think President Yi has been doing a great job at sort of balancing those. We saw that as evidence. We saw in the recent visit to China, right? They were able to make some progress on the K-pop, right? The Hallyu ban, right? To allow more Korean pop groups to have more freedom in performing in China and things like this. So I see some progress there. At the same time, he's mostly been keeping the Trump administration happy in terms of being willing to be flexible with its alliance, in terms of pivoting towards the broader Indo-Pacific region. And I feel like that he's going to continue to maintain that practical balancing act as we go forward. It's going to become more difficult as the chip situation becomes more, integrated with military, right? As military has become more fueled by AI and fueled by technology and drones, it's going to become trickier to do that. But for the meantime, I think he's going to be doing a pretty good job.
Right, so other than trade, South Korea and the U.S. have also made a pact to build nuclear-powered submarines together. And what do you think this joint project signifies for South Korea?
Yeah, so on the one hand, it's really significant, right? It means that, the U.S. does not share that technology, like nuclear submarine technology, with everybody. It's only shared it with, historically, the United Kingdom and Australia. And so it's kind of signaling that South Korea is sort of moving towards the inner circle of the U.S. alliance commitments, right? How much that means in the current administration is unclear, given how he's treating his European partners. But for the meantime, I think we can look at this as like a signal that Korea's importance is certainly elevated. It gives it more autonomy to move not just around the peninsula, but through as a to be a broader maritime power, right, in the region. Obviously, it gives it a strategic advantage over North Korea. So there are a number of positive effects, but certainly this looks like an elevation of its status within the U.S. alliance network.
Right, and Trump has also made several offers for talks with North Korea during his tenure, as Pyongyang demands to be acknowledged as a nuclear power. And how do you see the Trump administration navigating through this?
Yeah, so I think Trump has been pretty clear about this, and he's has dropped the talks of denuclearization. He has already de facto recognized North Korea as a nuclear power, without explicitly saying, "Oh, it's sanctioned by international law" or something like this. So I think for him, meeting with Kim Jong-un would not mean, doesn't equal recognition as a nuclear power in his, right? Everything is just pragmatic, and he's not really concerned about formal statuses or the language that people use. And so that's pretty much been his policy so far in terms of pursuing further talks. I think at this point, I don't really see a lot of advantages. I don't see a lot to gain from meeting with North Korea unless they're willing to actually make us substantive changes, which seems pretty unlikely. So it's unclear what he would actually get if denuclearization is not the point and they're not actively at war, right, or at the risk of war. It's unclear what he would have to gain from that, unless they're going to offer something big, right? And that doesn't seem like that's going to happen right now.
Okay, thank you for your insight today, Professor. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.